Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's December 3, 2024. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. And today we're honored to have Dudley Saunders back for part two. Dudley, where in the heck are you calling in from?
I'm from Koreatown, Los Angeles.
How cool is that? Now, we covered a lot in part one, and I recommend people check it out. So this is asking you about your tipping points for your calling. So I would say maybe your two callings are a writer and a musician, being, musician being singer songwriter. You write both music and lyrics. So
Right.
yeah, so going along, you're growing up, your dad's a journalist, you're very, you're learning knowledge and probably a lot from books and experience. What were you studying in high school and college? It just says, oh, I want to be a writer, that's my calling. And then I want to be a musician, that's my calling. What's those tipping points?
Well, I can have to back up. It actually, when I was a small child, we had a Shakespeare in Central Park in Louisville, Kentucky. And so I don't remember if we talked about this or not, but early on, and my father was a journalist, but he was also like a critic of film and theater. And so I used to see film at 10 o'clock in the morning when he'd go to a screening. Very strange things. And my mother was actually, she worked with the what they call the Carriage House Players, which is a small theater company in Louisville, Kentucky in the 60s. And I guess 60s, it would all be that because, yeah. So I would kind of tag along with her. And they, for some reason, at one point they did a production of Dracula, and they had a coffin, and I went to sleep in the coffin. Which is where they found me. So there was a lot of creativity around me. What I would more kind of say is that I didn't really think in terms of genre. I always thought just in terms of art and expression. And I was always drawn to those little moments, in any kind of art that kind of make you kind of go, ah. I think in poetry, they call it the frisson, that kind of a moment that seems to encapsulate something that kind of opens a window in your brain and your heart. And you just like, it's a little moment of revelation that you couldn't have had before. So that was always what I was drawn to. And, whether it was in performance, I mean, I would say that because of that theater, I kind of thought I was drawn to theater, but I realized in time that I was actually drawn to kind of experimental theater more, because I wasn't really as interested in traditional narrative, as much as that went. And I wasn't interested in traditional, just entertainment. I wanted those moments that hit me in the gut or stab me in the heart. And I what was more interesting to me is it was my big turning point in my life, because I was kind of confused. I was doing a little bit of everything. I was trying to get to those moments, and whether I did it with a guitar or with some language, I just wanted to get to it. And it was really, I think it was in maybe around 1984 in New York, because I came to New York. I wanted to kind of get on and start creating this stuff, but I didn't know quite what it was. And it was when someone mentioned the term performance art to me, like, what's that? And so I went downtown to the East Village, and I think the first thing I did, I went to see a watch face performance, and it kind of cut across every genre. And it was like permission, like, oh, you can do these things that don't have to make traditional sense. You can go straight for that poetic, a moment that turns you inside out. I wanted to feel more alive through art than I could on my own. I was always trying to become more than I am. And you can't become more than you am if you can't take some kind of input, if you don't have things waking you up. I suppose there are the geniuses who just, without any input at all, they just come out and they have this strange vision of their own. But I needed to take in the world, and I needed to take it in ways that were not pre-digested. That was it. So I really always wanted that moment where you couldn't quite define what it was. And so it got past all your expectations. And that was the thing I really liked about performance art. If you do theater, people know what a play is and they have expectations about it. And they look for those things. You see this in movies. We'll see a traditional narrative and like, oh, I can see what's going to happen. This is the hero. This is going to be the conflict. This is the love interest. They're going to fight with them and they're going to come back around and come together later. So you kind of relax because you kind of know the beats. I like not knowing the beats. I like the fact that when I went into see a piece of performance art, that I did not know what was going to happen. Yeah. And so anything was legitimate. Now, this was true in the music I wrote too. I mean, there are certain formal considerations, in music, but to me, it's you work with them. Almost sometimes you work against them. You make a decision not to follow that form, but it's not just to experiment for the sake of experimentation. It's to get around that expectation and do something powerful. The surprise, you listen to like an early Joni Mitchell song, and one thing is like, what you're doing things with the melody and harmony that you're not supposed to do, but somehow it's more beautiful because I don't expect it. Yeah. And that's kind of what you're going for. I'm not just trying to be different to be different. I'm trying to, get past your defenses so you can actually feel this even more. I don't want to feel comfortable when I'm consuming art. I want to be thrown off so that I am more alive. Because when you're within the constraints of a form that you know too well, you're defended. And there's no point in being defended if you want to be more alive. Yeah. So anyway, that performance art moment was probably the big transitional moment for me, which I then took and applied to every other kind of work I did.
Really good summary, concise and articulate. Again, you're a good communicator. Because, one thing I brought up, I sort of formulated this thing. Great art does two things. It fucks your shit up, and you go home and go, I can do that. So it inspires you. It doesn't necessarily have to fuck your shit up, but it create the unexpected. But that aha moment you talked about, you used a French word that started with the F. How do you spell that word?
Frisson. Frisson.
SSON. Okay, thank you. Because is that similar to what Joyce calls an epiphany in everydayness? You call it a revelation. Would you consider it like that, an epiphany?
It's like an epiphany. Often it's not something you can put into words. I love, what's that great word I just think about? I've forgotten already. Anyway, just something that it's best are the things that I can't encapsulate in a word. Yeah. It's ineffable. It's ineffable. It's something, and I have to think about it to try to understand what it is. But I felt something that I wasn't expecting to feel, that I didn't know I could feel, Penny Arcade she's doing her memoir project, and I'm working with her on this documentary, and she has this great title for the project it's about her life. It's called The Art of Becoming, which is so great, because that's isn't that what we're all trying to do? We are all trying to become something that we aren't yet. Yes. And that becoming never stops, at least until you do, And
that's really good.
Isn't that the dream? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you don't have dreams, your dreams can't come true. But you guys are always inspiring me. Penny was really great when I interviewed her, and I appreciate this because a screenwriting teacher told me a great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. Say, when you're writing a play or you're writing a song, what role does intention play in your creative process?
Well, I think of, writing intention. I mean, it's kind of, I think more about exploration. I think, there was that, I think Malcolm Gladwell kind of wrote about it, the different kind of, there's the artist who comes in with one, flash of a new vision, and they just start doing it from the beginning. I think I'm more of I have to kind of explore. I start with what I don't understand, what I can't put my fingers on. And that's why I'm writing. in some respects, I think Flannery O'Connor said, well, she kind of said that, a point in one of her stories, created a shock in the reader because it created a shock in the writer too, when it happened, so if I'm not going to surprise myself, why should you be surprised? If I'm not going to feel strongly, why should you feel strongly? So start from first principles, you have to amaze yourself. Amazing. And that's an amazing thing, because like when you hack at something, and all of a sudden something opens and something spills out of your pen, and like, where did that come from? I don't know. Thank God it did. But that's what I want. I want my talent to show me more than I actually know up here.
Wow. So Duchamp said there's no art without an audience, Dudley. What role does the audience play in your creative process? How much are you thinking of your listener when you're writing your song?
Well, that was a question I was asked early on. I didn't have an answer for it. But I mean, finally, later, I kind of decided, well, it's somebody, my audience is somebody like me, I think.
Yeah.
I ultimately, someone who's trying to explore more. But, I used to, what was I did say something about that. I wanted people who were emotionally adventurous.
Oh, yeah.
Who else wants to feel things they haven't felt? Who wants to feel things strongly? Who's excited to be a little uncomfortable? And I will say that I make a point, like the last, complete record I made. And I remember when I was producing, the joke is I said, I think this is my pop record, but it was really more when I was working with Ed Tree, and I said, look, my main thing is that these songs are what they are. They're weird. These are kind of made up chords and everything, but I want to make this what it is as accessible as possibly can be. And so when there's this weird key change in here and you shift these chords and it's kind of like a mini chorus here, I want to do as much as I can to underscore what I've done so it's as absorbable as possible by listeners who may not be really super sophisticated. And so, maybe we need to put a little harmony here. Maybe we need to like hit more of a downbeat so they can feel the change in this section to that section. So it doesn't just kind of go by quickly. And so that's the kind of effort. I do not want to be obscure if I don't have to. I mean, you do something different and some people go like, I have no idea what that is, and they just check out. So how can I help you as much as I can as an audience to be able to take in what I'm doing and feel it as an intention that, this wasn't just me being sloppy. There's a point to it. I can't force you to do that, but I do think that in the production of what I'm doing, I can do my best to make it easier for you, but it's still the animal it is.
Yeah.
So
McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. Like the knife and fork extends our teeth, and the shutter in a camera or projector extends our eyelid, and maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. What is two things? What does the writing utensil extend for you, whether it's a pen or a keyboard? And what does the guitar extend for you? What humanness?
I have to think about that. What is the guitar? Well, there is an element of play. I think, I'm thinking, well, let me just thinking about the guitar right now, because there's an element of play, of being inexpert with what I'm doing. And so it can make noises I can't make. And so if I spend my time with it, and it's almost like a collaborator in a weird way, because it has certain capacities, but I have to kind of let myself play with it. And, more recently, I was actually returning to a song that I wrote, 40 years ago, that I never recorded. And it's interesting because it's formally, it's very looser than I would do today. But there's something like emotionally very true about it and raw about it that I like. And so I've kind of been wrestling with it a little bit, which is interesting to go back to old work, there's a tendency like you should let old work be old work. But you can still be in conversation with it. And so I found myself playing, it's more traditional in terms of, the chords I'm using. There are some odd ones in it, but I've been trying to kind of, I have to keep playing it over and over again. That's one of the things that happens with me. It's just sort of this sort of repetition, a little obsessiveness, a little OCD is very helpful in art. And, just keep going back and going back. And what can I tease out? And what does it tease out in me?
Yeah.
It's kind of, I mean, it's as if you're a singer but there are things you can't do with your own voice. So you have other voices. So I guess in some respect, and the actual writing, like the pen or the keyboard, is kind of interesting. The keyboard, you can kind of flow as fast as thought or speech almost. But there's something about the pen that actually slows you down in a good way. And, it shifts. There are times where, no, I need to not move so fast. And there are other times where I need to be as glib as I can be. I tend to do a lot of very fast writing at times. And then I have to stop. And then there are times where it'll take me 4 years to find, the right words. And I have to have patience. So you have to go very slow and very fast sometimes. And that's what it kind of allows me to do. There's a terrible thing when you're driving in a car and all of a sudden words come to you and you can speak them and oh my God, I wish I was recording right now because when I sit down, these will be gone.
Yeah, I find that on a bicycle riding too. It's just the turning. There's something about the turning of wheels in motion where your brain is sort of free to jam. So, what's the function of music?
Well, the function of, I don't know what that is. I mean, music is sort of oral emotion. Wow. Just kind of.
I like borrowed emotion. Well,
aural, A-U-R-A-L, oral emotion.
Oh, aural. I thought you said borrowed, like you borrow it. Here, I'm gonna loan my emotion out. Here, you can borrow it.
It's kind of like a repository for for the heat of emotion. You can always return to it. It's almost like it's made it into a physical, listenable object that it's kind of a container for it. And it's also a creator. It can create emotion that isn't there right now.
Yeah.
And experience, not just emotion, because it's, emotion can be generic. And I'm going to be very sad, or I think Joni Mitchell says, we have our happiness in major and our sadness in minor. And that's very, limiting, because most happiness has a strain of sadness in it inherently.
Yeah.
And so, being able to contain all that kind of, it's almost like a time and place exists in music as well as emotion. And that's why it can feel like an entire world rather than just, happy, sad.
Yeah.
And I think those are the most effective things, about music and about a song in particular. They can conjure all of that up.
Yeah. Well, Copeland says the 4 elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. How do you integrate them? Do you focus on one more? Is there any kind of way you navigate those 4 major elements: melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color?
Well, I mean, I think lately I kind of feel a lot more about rhythm. I mean, tone color that's interesting because that gets ignored a lot. Yeah. Particularly, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I do use a lot of, I may use more, I've had more people bring up, at least in, when I performed, there's a lot of maybe more dynamic, stuff going on in my music in terms of, I don't all stay here. I kind of bring things back and forward. And we were doing this sort of sing through of the Snow Queen musical that I'm doing with Sarah Schulman in October. And it was really, as I was working with other musicians, just, there are some things that controlling the dynamics in it were kind of so central. And it was something I really had to struggle to kind of get across, to some of the performers, because, you have to be able to kind of come down to kind of come back up. And it's not all, a lot of people will treat like a song as like this kind of escalating drama that just kind of heads up here, but it's like, no, it has movements inside of it, and you have to go up and down. Now you've got to pull back to be able to come up here, and then this has sort of a twist in it. It's not all just up or down. We have to kind of go sideways here and be suspended. There has to be a what's that, rubato, I need a little rubato here, don't be so like driving through. And it's, most musicians are kind of trained, they got a gig going and they want to bring the audience along on their bop. It's like, no, not here. That's not what's going on. You have to listen to what's happening in it. And I think that's where color becomes really, really important. Color and dynamics, I kind of really work hand in hand with each other. Yeah. There's the quality of a tone, of a vocal tone in particular.
Yeah.
But, when is it light? When is it heavier? There are times where it does need to be heavy. Other times it needs to really float, and that's inherent in the music itself, but it's often easy not to notice if you don't have time to spend with the music. And of course, for me, I'm inside it, so I kind of know. And so I hand it to someone, and they're new to it. They're trying to figure it out. And I'm always a little shocked that it's not as obvious to everyone else as it is to me. So that's good. This is good for me to have to communicate to a lot of other people, in preparation for a performance, because it really, helps me understand. I understand more of what I'm doing when I have to talk about it to other people. And sometimes it's a little shocking, like, oh, there's a lot going on in this. I didn't think so. It was second nature to me,
Well, it feels like you led me right into the silent question. Thelonious Monk said silence is the loudest sound in the universe. And, Miles talks about the space between notes. And George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, said funk is the absence of. You've talked about this with the word dynamics. How do you know when not to play, when to incorporate silence in the middle of something that's filling, the sound? It's hard to have silence in music, but how'd you form that aesthetic when to not play?
Well, I always think it has, to me, it always comes down to, the content of what you're singing about. And there are moments where you have to stop and let that moment ring out. I'm thinking right now, I'm thinking about the song I wrote, The Rosewood Casket. And I think there was like there's this sort of moment after the bridge where he goes, and it's sort of this sort of ballad song about these, these brothers. And I think, and their father who's killed somebody and is trying to keep it a secret his whole life. And so what does, that distance do to the kids themselves, who never know and don't know why he's so far away from them? And I think, and there's a bridge which goes, and years dissipate like a dream that hits the day, like a dream that cannot come awake. The woman he murdered, she says, kiss my skinless face, but he knows even Jesus' love can come too late. And that was a moment that needed to suspend.
Wow.
And so it became quiet, because you needed that to ring out, and to kind of let that settle in there. So yeah, there are things like, to me, it's really, it's the content, and not just the narrative content, but that emotional moment.
Yeah.
I mean, what does it mean when like you feel like you're beyond redemption and you can't share that with anybody?
Wow. So good. I love that ring out line. And Dudley, my friend says the 3 T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. So technique, you've learned how to play this stuff. Theory, the structure, you can communicate it to the other musicians. How does one acquire taste?
Well, I think I mean, you have to be able to really pay attention, and you really hear what the music is doing. I mean, look, when I first began, I mean, I had very few skills, and I think a lot of people, when they first start playing, they just start like, strumming away or picking away the guitar, and you just pick all the way through, and it doesn't even occur to you. You may feel like something's kind of boring in here. Why, because you can't really. You just have to get used to music. You have to get used to the content. You have to feel the flow of the drama, that is inside of it, because it is a crystallizing form. You are taking, you're taking experience and you're putting a frame around it, which you're saying, look at this.
Yeah.
This is something to look at. We walk down the street every day and it's just stuff we're passing by. But if you put a frame around it, there are pictures, there are portraits all around us that we don't see because we haven't framed it. We haven't stopped to look and pay attention. And that's what art does. That's what music can do. Once you start doing that, you have to spend time with it. You have to make sure that when you're looking, you're really seeing. And I think taste has to do with, what is actually expressing this. And, look, there are a lot of people out there who will sing with incredible, overwhelming emotion, but it can be so overwhelming, it becomes primary color. It doesn't have any of the texture of real feeling. And I think they used to call it that, like, hysterical singing. You can hear a lot of bravura singing, whoa, whoa. But that never, and that can be, exciting to a degree, but it actually doesn't make me that emotional.
Yeah.
Think of a John Prine song. These are very
perfect example. Yeah.
I'm just saying like that. And all of a sudden like that gets into your gut and you can't forget it.
Yep.
A great James McMurtry song will do that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
Just like, it gets under your skin and you can't forget it and it haunts you. I want to haunt you. I want to be haunted,
You explain taste well, because, everybody goes, well, it's experience or it's exposure, but you got deeper there, Dudley, and I appreciate it. But here's McLuhan's quote on taste in music, and I'm curious your response, any reaction. He said, song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comments?
Well, that's interesting. Language and culture, they do control what we feel. And that's, why having world culture, changes us. Because, inside, I think it's really important to pay attention to hyper local culture at the same time, because that's a real thing too. You just have to you have to have the flavor of it. Look, I'm from Kentucky. There was a lot of bluegrass when I was coming up, but honestly, I didn't really get bluegrass until I left Kentucky. I knew something was there, but I couldn't quite put my handle on it. But it was actually going to New York, hearing a lot of different music and spending, years with a lot of different kinds of music that let me kind of come back to it, and.
Well, what's more fundamental, music or language?
Well, I don't think there's really a difference. For some of you, I was thinking about like French songs like, Satie or the whole, French cabaret kind of culture there, and if you listen to like a lot of Edith Piaf, there's a whole like emotionalism, or Jacques Brel, there's a certain kind of emotionalism that feels like there's a kind of dirtiness to it.
Yeah.
But it's also highly cultured at the same time. So it's both dirty and elevated. And that's a particular way of looking at music. And then you bring that, and then as you hear German music or something, you find that you end up, knowing what those things are, but you're not trapped by any of them. Each of them is a window that opens a different part into your soul and into your music. It gives you, different ways to feel about them. Look, it's very, when you're composing, it's very easy, or let me say, it's actually hard not to kind of find yourself, stuck in a lot of the, the pre-existing forms. Your brain's used to hearing certain things. We all, there's something in, and there are things that are kind of in our human DNA. We all like, 1-4-5 chord structure. We like it, and we're also annoyed by it because it's so obvious. So we're always like in this, and sometimes you have to do the thing that is simple and traditional because that is what is required at that moment. When working on the musical, like, well, this guy's a little bit literal minded. So actually, it doesn't make sense. He would not do some of the more sophisticated experimental things that I would do. But I'm not that guy. I am writing about that guy. I'm trying to bring him to life. Both, so I have to be inside and outside him at the same time. But because I've heard a lot of music, because I can reach beyond just my own, dumb Kentucky head. I can kind of get inside him. But I can also come back to Kentucky. I can also come back to bluegrass music, and in some ways, I'm freed from the over familiarity, which lets me dive in a little deeper to it. I have to say, sometimes I wonder if I'd had a different life. If I'd been heterosexual or something, maybe I would have been like a bluegrass musician.
Wow.
It would not have been, maybe I wouldn't have, had to go out and, maybe that's not true, but just, when you feel like there are things missing, there are things that the culture you're in don't speak to you about, and you have this. The truth is, there's always something to me like my father was a kind of a wanderer too. He was not. My great grandfather was Daniel Boone, who always getting lost all the time.
Wow.
So I could see my father. You go out in the woods and he start wandering off the trail. Like, where is he? He's lost somewhere. And I do the same thing. I don't travel as much as my father did, except in my work.
Wow. Yeah. That's you really brought up two great ones. McLuhan says, that extension thing, what does the movies extend? And he said, the foot. Most people say the eye or memory or, whatever, but the foot, because you're traveling on a magic carpet. But one of my favorite McLuhan jokes is the explorer is lost in the woods with his guide. And he turns to the guide and he says, we're lost. And the guide goes, we not lost, teepee lost. Because for them, but this is a question I just came up with, and you're like the first person I asked it. So why is 4/4 time the most commonly used time signature in Western music?
Because it's the easiest.
You think
it's the simplest,
Yeah.
It's we I think the human animal, we like things that are balanced and even. It's why, like, a lot of us have trouble if you sit in a chord that doesn't resolve, it drives people crazy. I want it to finish the beat. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. What? Where is it? But that's also why when you interrupt that, it gets your attention.
Yeah.
And I just think if you're going to interrupt what people are expecting, with that kind of primal sort of 4/4 feeling, you have to bring them something. You can't just do it. You can't trick people. Art is not about tricking you. It's about bringing something alive. It's about surprising you with something real. Something. I got to feel something out of that. I've written stuff in 5/4, but I got to really use that 5/4. It's not just to play, it's to pull your attention to something, and in a way that's emotionally satisfying. That's an adventure, So don't trick people, but use everything.
Yeah, but it's like you knew I was going to a Ruth Draper quote next of Dudley. It's like you have ESP. It's like she said, the key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. I mean, when I see you perform, I see that. When you directed Heather in her play, I see that. She brought the audience up onto the stage with her. But Ruth Draper articulated that well. But how do you do that? How do you bring the audience up into the stage, up into this scene with you?
In a way, you have to do the opposite, because you have to go into the audience with your work.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think I was listening to this Joan Baez song from like 1979. So, we're out of the 60s. It's kind of a period where she was, no longer hip. And I was thinking like, well, what's that, that early Joan Baez, that crystalline, otherworldly soprano, which would just like grab you. It's like terrifying. But the song her voice was kind of darker at this point. But I realized there's something about it. It's like, why she was doing this one song, and I was thinking like, why does this make me emotional now? And I said, it has the quality of somebody looking you in the eye and seeing you and not looking away, not letting you look away. Sometimes she would hold those notes really, really long, and they would be sustained. And it was like, well, if you clipped it off, we'd all get comfortable. But it's like she's telling you something and she's holding you on that moment. Yeah. I think it was a line like, you must have whiskey or you'll die, and then holding that out, and it's like, oh, I felt it. And so it's kind of like you have to be, you have to put yourself out there that much. I have to sustain what it is and look you in the eye. And it's a kind of great vulnerability. The naked person in the room is the most powerful person. It's the most vulnerable are the people who still have their clothes on. But if you allow yourself to be naked and present it to them and, not run away from it, it can be overwhelming, but it can also be transformative,
It's like this is a perfect example of effects precede causes. Like what you just said answers the next question. It's like, I'm serious, but I have to go back because I love this. You're saying the quality of looking him in the eyes, because I spoke with a musician last week, and they says, well, you want to get eye contact. You want to get them to dance. That's how you bring them up onto the stage. But you said the quality of looking them into the eyes, and it reminded me of Sam Wasson wrote about Bob Fosse's dancing. He says, Fosse's dancers dance like they were dancing. They acted like they were dancing, sort of like how Buster Keaton would turn a stumble into a dance, And so
that's the thing. You use all of yourself, including, why I'm thinking like, if you saw like, what's her name? Bette Midler performing like in the mid 70s later.
I saw one of those shows. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking like, she'd do a song. I remember this recording of Surabaya, Johnny, this old Brecht Weil kind of song. And, she did everything that you're not supposed to do in a song. She used everything that's wrong with her voice as a tool. And that was very interesting and inspiring, because, I thought we were supposed to be using the beautifulness of our voice tone and everything. Or look, Diamanda Galas, she could sing like an opera singer. Yeah. So, I mean, you're not supposed to put all these things together.
Yeah.
But look what happens when you do. Unbelievable things open up that are so far beyond, what is supposed to happen. That is incredibly inspiring to me. And so that's kind of, I'm not there to just be an entertainer. I mean, I want it to be beautiful in some ways, but I want it to be emotionally impactful too.
Yeah.
And whatever it takes, it's all grist for the mill. There are no wrong things you can do as long as they are to a point. Or they're meant to kind of keep you, look you in the eye. I may not be looking you physically in the eye, but I'm going to be very exposed and open.
Yeah, I love it. The quality of looking you in the eye. So you've answered the Leonard Cohen question I'm going to ask twice now, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Leonard says, the only way you can sell a concert is if you put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. What role does risk play in your creative process?
Everything. Everything. If I'm comfortable, you're going to be bored. Or you will be with what I do anyway. Or I'm going to get bored.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm not a little bit scared, why should you feel anything?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, honestly, I mean, I I don't record or perform everything I've written. And I remember one time, like, this is a good song and I'm playing it. And I'm singing it and I'm bored in the middle of it. Why am I bored? Perfectly good song. It just doesn't work for me. I have to feel, I got to feel more alive than that. And I don't want to just repeat what I'm comfortable with. It has to be an experience of its own. Oops. Have I lost you?
Well, yeah, I'm here, Dudley.
you're back.
You broke up a little, but I heard it. But what does courage mean to you now?
Well, I mean, the thing about courage is that to be courage, you have to be terrified. To have courage, you have to be terrified. It's not courageous. If you don't feel fear, you're not being courageous. You're just, a sociopath or you're just out of it somehow. It's when you kind of know the danger of what you're doing and you do it anyway. You have to know that you feel inadequate to the task and you do it anyway. That's real courage. So courageous people feel terrified and inadequate all the time. That's how you know you're being courageous. Yeah. We have it backwards for most of us. To be fearless, a fearless person is not courageous. A fearful person who acts is courageous, and we should celebrate them.
Fearful, yeah. So this is Viola Spolin. If the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. What role does struggle play in your creative process?
That's interesting. Well, I mean, there's a lot of struggle. I mean, struggle, it depends. There are, to frustrate you, there are moments where it's no struggle at all, where it all just flows out perfectly.
Yeah.
And then the next thing takes forever. But there is a moment the struggle. Well, I mean, there are times that you will never feel the struggle. It will just feel like it came out naturally, and you'll believe that, like, oh, that's the thing I hate about, like, great writing. It's like, oh, it all just flows so perfectly. Oh, you're just a brilliant thinker. These things come out. One of the great things, I think it was Jimmy Webb, who happened to be passed by the recording studio when Joni Mitchell was working on one of her records. And, I listened to think, what a genius. These things just pop out of her. And it's like, I had no idea until I was there watching her, how hard she had to work to get these things to happen, to make these, these creative leaps that just seemed, and that was kind of, that was a great thing for someone like me to hear, Yeah. So I don't know. I think I want you to feel the courage it took to do these things. I don't know about the struggle.
Yeah.
Maybe the struggle is an emotional struggle rather than, a struggle in the creation. Because often what the struggle is to get out of your own way, to get your ego aside, to get your controlling part aside, and, and just get to that thing that seems to come out of nowhere. That the magic, and that is something I know it's there. I don't have control over it. I know at this point that if I stay with it long enough, it will come. Something will come that needs to come. But I'm responsible, but I can't be fully in control either.
That's Maria Callas. She said, in order to be a performer, you have to have half your brain in control and the other half out of control. It's like, yeah, good luck. But you know, that was good how you distinguish between risk and struggle, because you know they kind of go along when I ask them one right after the other. And this great singer I spoke with a couple weeks ago, I says, "What role does risk play?" And he goes, "I leave that in the dressing room," because he wants to come out and feel like he's confident. And he probably, you know, having sung for 50 years, he has that confidence. But again, how you distinguish between risk and struggle helped me understand that. You know, it's also, I spoke with Michael Apted, the filmmaker, 40 years ago. I says, "Why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast?" And he says, "Because we've learned to take in information faster." Most people don't know, Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it really flourished in the 80s with Scorsese saying, "Hey, I cut my films faster because of MTV." So, you know, my question is asked with a bias: can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Um, it depends on the kind of information. Some things, yeah. There are some things that they're bits of, well, it depends on who you are. Look, at this point in my life, I think probably maybe younger than ever before. Maybe by the time you're 40, you have seen all the stories thousands and thousands and thousands of times.
Yeah.
And so you start to know all the beats, and so you can shorthand things for these people. When I was a kid, I'd go to the movie with my father, and he would take me to like a scary movie, and sometimes like he would like poke me when he knew like there was going to be a jump scare, because I had like, "How did you know that was going to happen?" It's like, but I was 12. I had no idea. I hadn't seen it as many times as he had. And so, but because we have grown up with television and movies, just over and over and over again, I think, and, a whole like history that's available to us, in, TV shows and streaming and everything, people know all these traditional narratives intimately, far younger. And so for them, you edit differently for a 10-year-old than you do for a 40-year-old, I think.
Well, is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
I think you can put things on kind of a background algorithm, but we're not paying attention to them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, my sister for years, she talked about someone who watches movies. When she was working around the house, she would put movies on, they played in the background all the time. Yeah. So, it was like background music to her. But, if you are, I don't think you can't multitask experience and feeling. You can't, and in some respects, when we are multitasking, so it's why it's so much more important we have something which stops us. What does that frisson do? It's your eye goes, "Whoa, what is that?"
Yeah.
And you have to stop and feel it and think about it and take it in. That's the thing. You can know all these traditional narratives, but I mean, these traditional narratives still work. These kind of Lion King narratives, which is something that's been told over and over again. And yet, even like in any kind of movie where there's a bully who comes along, you still, it's like, I've seen this, it's such a hackneyed thing, and it still kind of, gets you. You want the bully to get beaten. There's an element of wish fulfillment in all narratives, in all stories. Yeah. And that's part of like it's in our DNA. We want those things. The thing is, we know life is horrible. We know that, the underdog, usually just gets beaten and destroyed. We know that. So often, like, I don't want to see that again. I want to see the time it didn't happen. I want to see the time of what I wish had happened with the bully, in fifth grade, that didn't happen. Instead, I got beaten up and everyone hated me and thought I was, a pussy or something. And, I want to see when it can't. I want to see other possibilities, please.
Yeah. Well, that's great. You brought up this word narrative, because Hollis Frampton, Great experimental filmmaker said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
Mm-hmm.
And I added the question, can you forget to die?
Well, I think about death a lot, but I think about it very much now like going to sleep.
Yeah.
And that sort of feels like what it will be. It will be, I had a friend a few years ago who went into a surgery that, there was nothing, it was just something weird. I think there was like a tumor that was near his aorta. So it's a very, there's nothing dangerous about the surgery itself, but it's close enough that they could nick his aorta and he could die. So, he was just part of our life, totally healthy. And then they nicked his aorta and he died. So he went to sleep and just didn't wake up ever.
Wow.
And I think about that. I mean, our what is stories for us are things that, come to a close. And they, and whatever that's trying to communicate to us is completed. But in our lives, we're just living and then we drop out. And so we have to kind of back time, like, well, what's the story of their life? We have to kind of invent it out of when they died. But really, we're on the continuing adventures of Dudley or Gerry, it's just a continuing, story until we stop. And I don't live as if I'm going to die, even though I do recognize that, my diminished physical capacity is there and I adjust to it, but I'm not preparing to end, So I kind of forget I'm going to die. I'm very both conscious of it and I forget about it because I'm not, I still have things to experience. I still want to be more alive than I am right now. I
There
want
you
to.
go. That's what I want to be. I want to be more alive. That's funny because Dudley, most people, a lot of people they sort of freak out at the question because they don't know if I'm asking it literally or metaphorically. And I'm like, yeah, well, you can answer it either way you want. And then McLuhan says, well, all words are metaphoric. They're all made up. So the word literal is the metaphor. But I would like to know your hunch or guess. What was the motive of the cave artist?
Oh, yeah. I have a friend who did a big documentary about cave art. So it's something I've kind of thought a lot about. I think about it because when I did my piece, Bird Bones, at the Kitchen in New York, and it was come very late, and I was working with this. They kind of gave me like their staff lighting guy, and I was working with him, and he was great. And I talked, because that was still the age of AIDS, and so I had that feeling like, I'm doing this art, but how do I feel, about like they should be spending more time, in the streets protesting. And he said, well, just, there's some. He said, I always thought about that. Humans have always made art. It's just part of being human.
Yeah.
It's just there's not any humanity if there's no art. If we didn't need to make it, we wouldn't be making it. And everybody makes art. Kids draw. They don't know that they're not allowed to draw, that they're not good artists, so they just draw. They start singing things. They start acting things out. It's something in our human spirit. We can't not make art. And I love that thing that Linda Ronstadt said. That she said we delegate too much of our singing to professionals.
Yes,
And that's what's it's brought me back to like the
repeating. Yeah,
brought me back to,
that is beautiful.
And that's it. We have to. I think it's made me really think a lot about. I mean, as I go around, the country, and I always try to stop in local art galleries, and I'm amazed at like how much great art there is all over this country that no one pays any attention to. Yeah. And there's so much talent, and I just feel like I have to honor the making of art by everyone. That to me,
you're a good supporter. That's a beautiful thing. you reminded me of that great joke. The kid realizes his dad goes to a job and does work. And so he says, so his dad's an art teacher. And he says, so Dad, what do you do? He says, I teach people how to draw. And he said, you mean they forgot? What's more important, Dudley, conviction or compromise?
Well, I guess it depends on what you're compromising about.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say I make compromises when I try to. I can play something on my guitar alone, and I can hear everything that song is doing. But when I'm going to be handing it to other people's ears, there are times I think like, well, I don't know if I'm compromising, but I am finessing it in a way that I might not if it was only me going to hear it. So, I mean, there's compromise where I tell you something different than I'm trying to tell you because I think you won't be happy. So that's not I mean, I don't know if that's really a compromise, but that's where I kind of feel gross. I have to, like I said, I try to make it as accessible as I can, but it is what it is. And I have to give it the honor of how I made it, of the structure of it. Because if I take too much of that away to make it palatable to you, I actually lose important parts of what it is. So you have to have the conviction. You have to not in a heady way, but you have to look at something of what you're doing and know that you're not full of shit. Do I really mean this? Have I rushed through this? Does this, is this, I'm always, I stick with the conviction of what I'm trying to do. Look, I'm not a pop star. I realized I never really wanted to be a pop star or a popular artist of any kind. It was always like the weird cult people who I was personally interested in. And and that's what's kind of weird because you enter the music industry and, the frame of reference is completely different than what I was doing, so you can be, people can try to talk you in and can kind of freak you out by, telling you to hit the beats that they think you should hit because the audience wants them. Well, that's not my audience. My audience are these weird people. I don't know who they are exactly.
But
so
the two lines are Al Flipside, don't sell out, sneak in. And Paul Schrader said, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out, but fail.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I tried to make it as easy as possible for you to take this. I've tried to make my performances as dynamic as I possibly can. And look, some people, I've had lots of, not lots, but I've had, many people be really strongly impacted by what I do.
Yeah.
And I've had lots of other people like, I don't know how this is making me uncomfortable. I got to get away. And also just the thing that the weirdest thing for most of people, who are like me, is not that they don't feel anything, but they can't figure out how to define it. They can't figure out a pre-existing slot for it. And so I remember after I did Bird Bones, the guy who was doing the press said, you are so talented and I have no idea what to do with you. It's like, what are you supposed to do with this weird talent you've got? I can't get you on a sitcom. I can't, I can't put you on Broadway, because you're not doing anything like that, but I can tell it's strong, but, and that's something that's kind of bespoke. It's, we have categories. You have to be categorizable. Yeah. And honestly, if I was, in some ways, have never been quite weird enough to be totally, I'm not John Zorn, I'm not, something that's just completely out to lunch. Look, because it included things that are about folk art and folk song and folk narrative, mixed in with, things that are quite, avant-garde at times. But so it's kind of in that sort of in between stage.
Thank God we need that. We need that. This is what Nadia Boulanger Quincy Jones. I think you summarized it. Your music can never be more or less than you are as a human being.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Well, in your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, second and third?
Ambition, skill, and luck. My ambition was not career ambition. I mean, I kind of had that assumption, like, oh, if you really do great work, people just recognize you, which is like, that's not how it works at all, of course. And in some respect, what I've had the least of is luck. But I can say, luck for me was happening to leave college in 1981, 82, and go to New York for what I know and realize would be the last extant, bohemian culture, art culture in America and in New York. I did not know it was disappearing, but I happened to be there. I happened to be around that kind of art world, or downtown art world, underground art world ethic that supported the ambition of my work and what I wanted to do. And I could be around people who were doing that as well, often in wildly different forms from me. But it was the ambition to go far, to risk more, to frighten yourself. The making of art is personally transformative. I mean, if it's not, what's the point in doing it? Yeah. For me, anyway. It was to change me. And if it'll transform me, maybe it'll transform you. It has a possibility of that. But I came to New York, I was a mess, and I took, the ghosts that were haunting me in the back of the head, the things that humiliated me, and I made them manifest. I made them concrete so they could be seen and looked at, and they terrified me. I remember working on something, I would be like writing, I kept having to get up from the desk and press myself into the corner of a room because it so freaked me out. And what I was doing was not anything I could personally justify. Wow. I couldn't tell. I was doing it, and it felt like I was doing something bad and wrong. Mm. And if you're not feeling that, you're not working hard enough. You're not risking enough. But it was not fun. But fortunately, I happened to be in an environment, a larger environment, where that felt, like that was what you were supposed to do. I think if I'd been 10 years younger, maybe I would have been just crushed by, all the art expectations of that post-bohemian period. Yeah. So what luck for me that I happened to get out of college after the first year and get there in time to experience that. Yeah. I would be a very different person. Yeah.
That's actually, again, a great lead-in, because two of my film heroes, George Manupelli says, his mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor said, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, environments, and cultures are dominant?
Well, excuse me. I mean, self-expression in terms of telling you what I know, I'm not interested. I want to tell you what I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to tell myself what I don't know. I wanted to find it out. I wanted to go on that discovery tour. So, now, of course, some things I'm, making manifest are things that frighten me, that humiliate me. If you're not courting humiliation, I always say this, you're not doing it. You're not doing it right. Yeah. That's risk. You should feel on the edge of humiliation and not being able to justify. I'm writing this, I'm doing this, I'm saying this, but I shouldn't do it. I can't tell you. You can shame me for it, and I have no way to defend myself. That's the stuff you've got to do. So
totally good. Totally. You should be teaching art, but can art making be egoless?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, the ego is saying that I have the right. I'm going to go ahead and write these things I can't justify, but it's not really about you. It's kind of like why I would say I have no gift for memoir. I can take a lot of things from my life, but I have to make them into something. They have to be about something. Telling you what happened to me is just like dead. That didn't tell you anything. It's what meaning I can find. It's where it can take me. You know,
Yeah.
there's some people, but there are a lot of people just like, this happened to me. Dad beat me, and wasn't it terrible? And it's like, yeah, okay. You know, you got to take me further. If you can read someone else who will tell you that, you know, why do I need to reinscribe old stories that are just, you know, where you know exactly what they mean and they mean exactly that, and then you can put them away. It's what, I mean, that's the whole point. What haunts you is in something that is irresolvable.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, a poet says that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh, it changes. That's the thing. You know, because I've jumped through different genres and I've combined genres, it's kind of whatever works. I'm not going to be stuck to, one form or another. That's why I think one of the first things that I began doing when I began doing things that began as, I began mixing like music and text, like a lot of the performance work. The music would start to play and I would talk, and then it would shift and there would be some sung lines and it would come back to speech and it would kind of flow back. I didn't feel constrained to one form that way. Actually, something I need to record, right now, which kind of, end up doing a weird thing. It kind of began as song and then it comes back. Think about that. I forgot about that, but, now I do that because, because there's so little audience that I feel completely free. I'm not in the East Village anymore, or the East Village is gone. It's not what it was. So I have my own personal East Village I operate with. I'm not sure if I think I may have forgotten your point.
That's fine. What's a major, well, no, I'll tell you one. Abigail Childs, the filmmaker. She says, "What form is your inner dialogue in?" She goes, "I wish I knew."
Well, my inner dialogue, I'm speaking in multiple voices at once.
Yeah, there you go.
Really, that's what it comes down to. Yeah. And I have felt that, at different times, like, oh, I need to focus on this form for a while. Because when there's not a particular stage or forum, for what you are doing, you often, I've often felt like, well, maybe you need to put this in a musical form, or maybe I think if I had more of those kind of opportunities to, do exactly what I want, maybe I would have become even more expansive and more complex. Some years ago, I did travel with, this performance piece, which was, text, and it was music, and it was video projections, that took place around me. And that was very interesting. It was such a lot of work.
Well, Dudley, tell me one major element of your creativeness that stayed the same in the years you've been doing this, and one major element that's changed.
Well, I do like to hold on to this kind of wild voice, which I used to call it was like Southern Baptist witnessing. Because in my life, I don't know if I talked about this before, but what I noticed when I was growing up is that the truth normally got told when people were out of control, and they would go into these kind of altered states. And that, it doesn't always speak. Sometimes it's quieter. It was very scary when I did it. And it was scary the first time I let that out. That was really terrifying. But it's trying to get past the logical part of your brain and the controlling part of your brain to kind of stay open to the wild part of myself. That has kind of stayed the same. What has changed is I have more capacity to contain the expression, and more capacity to, more skills around giving form to things. You know, I could not. I was like a non-guitar player when I began. I had to kind of teach myself back into it, and it was really only about maybe 12 years ago that I was talking to Ed, and I kept saying, "Well, I'm not a good guitar player." He says, "Oh no, you're really good." But I kind of created this own weird way of playing, and he's like saying, "No, that's good." And it was rare because this is a person who worked in more traditional music form. He's a great guy, and he's so creative when you let him be. But because works a lot of traditional forms more, he meets the work where it is. And so when I brought him stuff that was a little off, he was happy and thrilled to meet me where I was. But I have the ability to contain it. I can play the things that I imagine. And, you know, part of that's you give yourself, like, it's just going to take time to be able to do that. So I have more skills than I used to have, which I can use, but it doesn't mean I have to do them in a traditional way. I can do weird shit that I could only imagine, but couldn't quite make happen myself. But always hang on to the wildness that you pour into those skills.
You're inspiring me. I want to do that. You know, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Yeah. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, I think letting that wild voice come out, that was a weakness. You know, there are the parts of you that can think logically and linear. And one thing that's always driven me crazy in my life is that, you know, I kept finding myself in situations where I had to be the kind of under control and logical one. It's like, that's not what I'm good at. I need someone else to do this so I can kind of remain my wildness. I mean, the weakness was the part that I couldn't justify. It was the, you know, again, jumping off the subject. I call it like the ADD part of the brain. Yeah. You know, and there are times, look, times you have to kind of pull that together, but other times you have to give your ADD its own mind. And as it hops from, you know, with limited connection, I mean, I often can feel the connections that people listen and like, I have no idea what that is. What does one have to do with the other? It's like, but they do. To let that fly. And I will say it's also that when you're young, you think, oh, I'm going to get more together as I get older, and I'm not going to be so scattered. And it's like, no, that doesn't change at all. That's always there. But you've got to give it its freedom. You got to let that wild child be wild. And listen, you know. So that's the weakness, you know. Yeah. And I don't know what people, I suppose it's also that I don't know what people want. And I haven't quite understood it, and I'm bored by what they want a lot of the time. And so I could feel bad. That's me as a failure. I should be able to write. I should be writing a musical like Wicked. Whatever that is. I haven't seen it. You know, something that pleases a lot of people.
Right. But Dudley, I think it's like Igor Stravinsky said, most people don't know what they like what they know. So if you just give them Wicked, then they're going to say, I like Wicked. But if you get, you know, it takes a true visionary like you to pursue what they see. This is a little twist to it. It's this saying that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel said, thank God I'm an atheist. So I'm just curious, your thoughts on this line, you create what you resist. Not you, Dudley, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Creates what one resists. Well, I mean, you're always in dialogue with the thing that you're arguing with. The thing that it's like the voice that's saying no to everything, that's telling you everything that's wrong with what you're doing. And I suppose if you get to that point of total freedom, what would actually drive you? You know? So That's, it's real. I think that's interesting. That's a useful thing, I think, for young artists to think about. You kind of problematize, you know, it's almost like, the conflict is kind of your subject. The conflict of
That's what
between,
the,
you know.
that's what the saying is saying. I mean, that's why Goldthwait, I think Goldthwait nailed it. You are what you hate. People are like, oh my God, I am what I hate. It's like, no, there's aspects of what you're resisting might be feeding into you. And it's like finding that balance or way to express it or
It's the
exercise.
energy, it's a
It's the
push pull of a
energy.
muscle. When you pull it,
It's
one muscle is contracting, one's expanding. That's how movement happens. It's
that's
not, we're not perfect. If we're perfectly balanced, we just don't move at all.
yeah. That's the etymology of the word jujitsu and judo is art and science gently. It's like
Ah.
it's push and pull. So these are 5 Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words.
Okay.
One, who started it all?
Me.
2, are we going to make it?
Yeah.
3, where do we put it?
In our laps.
Oh, I like that. 4, who's cleaning it up?
Nobody.
5, is it serious?
Deadly.
I saw a little smirk there, Dudley. Well, that's almost like, I asked you, I think David Mish. I says, can satire be destructive? He goes, that's the job of satire. If me or you draw a cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive. But Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the
Love that.
Good laugh, Dudley. What's the function of satire?
Well, it's funny because satire will affect you in 2 ways. One, it will make you really angry and insulted.
Yeah.
Or it will make you angrily delighted.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when
It drives you to resist.
wow. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
There are a lot, but what they have to struggle through to be fully human.
Yeah, fully human. What caused matriarchy?
What caused matriarchy? The absence of fear.
Oh my God. That is amazing. No one's ever said that one. Because I wrote this essay, Can Art Stop War? And it was like based on Maria Gimbutas and Rianne Eisler, Chalice and the Blade, that maybe we're a little more hardwired for cooperation than we are for violence. Most people are like, well, it's natural to be violent. And, that war was justified. I goes, there's no war that's justified. Maybe I'm an idealist dreamer, but, I don't think we're hardwired to be violent. I think we're more hardwired to be cooperative. And that's based on matristic civilization.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you are not in the kind of danger which makes you set everything about your local small c civilization aside, then you can just live, you can just care for each other, we can talk to each other. If I have to kind of say, we can't talk about that, you need to take this role for now because we've got to go steal food from them, or we have to beat those people who are trying to attack us, everything gets very rigid and everything gets subsumed in the act of violence. It's just like, which could be, you can say that's an act of protection. Now that's what it is, but everything's about, I got to provide and protect you. This kind of like the dominant kind of male, identity. It's all about being a provider and a protector, but not a human being. And in ancient cultures, when it used to be that when men came back from war, they couldn't just rejoin the society. Instead, they had to go through a purification process because it was understood that you were dirty, you were bloody, you were not fit to be around other people. And so there was understanding, we have to purify that from you and take that monstrousness out of you, that this is the thing, what we do to men when we send them to war. It's a kind of horrific abuse that we do to them, and they are traumatized no matter who they are. They are reduced to certain essential, elements that are not a complete and full human being. And this is kind of where what we struggle with today, right now, with men, that they're kind of trapped. Basically, we've continued to try to make men into warriors, we have to compete with other men. Why is it so hard for men to have actual real friendships with other men? Men really need affection and love from other men, but we have no way to get it. Because if it's all about, we have to be, dominating, we have to be in a pecking order. We can't feel too much. I mean, just what you would need. You go into battle, I don't have time to have emotions. I just have to, I can hate, I can, be angry, but that's really all I can do, because I have to accomplish killing you guys, and this is, so
it's the scene, Dudley, it's the scene in Finnegan's Wake where the guy's about to shoot the firing squad is going to shoot this guy, and he has to take a shit. So he starts shitting, and they go, "We can't shoot you while you're shitting." It really epitomizes, dude, you get eye contact with who you're killing. These guys are probably not going to kill each other. But if you're joysticking, drones, it's different. So Utah Phillips said anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Well, I mean, every person's entitled to make the rules for what they will tolerate, for what they want in their lives. And a group of people has extending from that, we in our community or our families, like we can make a collective rule, like you can't hit each other, but no one can come in and dictate that, because everyone has a right at some point. People have a right to, certain fundamental things like, safety and expression. And they have a right to say, I don't want to live like that, and leave, But collectively, I think we have to have, I think the trouble we have right now is that we have certain beliefs about what is acceptable behavior, but we only apply them to the people who have the most political power. And so if you are a person who has some kind of oppression, you are currently felt free. You are allowed to completely hate and dehumanize the powerful people, because you don't have the structural power behind you. But when I talk to people about this, it's like, well, how does this lead to the world that you want us to be in? And no one really has a conversation about that, because they're feeling like, well, we'll work that out later. Like once we get rid of patriarchy, then we'll figure it out. But in the meantime, we can go around and tell, all men are evil. You hear a lot of that online right now. All white people are evil. And like, look, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. No one can deny that. But my question is always like, well, how, when I was growing up, and the whole point around people like early feminism or Martin Luther King, it was love-based. And it was the idea we're aiming to a society where everybody matters and everyone has complete freedom. It's like we've kind of jumped back to a point where, well, we're kind of like in an adversarial mode, like you're in a court of law. In a court of law, you're not there to try to come to justice. The prosecutor wants to say make everything look as horrible as possible. The defense makes you're totally innocent, and then we hope we'll come out in the middle. So it's a battle rather than an attempt to kind of come together and find a truth that we can all recognize as real. Yeah. And I worry because there has to be some kind of larger vision toward any kind of liberation movement. What is the world we're trying to create? And if my actions are angry and hateful, and I have to say this, someone who is in ACT UP, which was a lot of anger in ACT UP, and it was incredibly useful. It created an engine for getting a lot of stuff done. But anger can only take you so far. There has to come a point where the anger has to turn into love.
Yeah, really good. Check out Laurie Anderson just put a video on YouTube of her reading 2 minutes of Rebecca Solnit saying what to do after this new administration gets in. And it is amazing because it really focuses. It's almost like you paraphrase a lot of what she's saying. Really, wordsmithery is great. Now, Dudley, I asked for 90 minutes. Can you go a little longer or you got to get going?
Sure. Yeah, I can go.
Yeah. So what's the difference? A couple things you brought up there, what you just said is, what's the difference between rights and responsibilities?
Well, I don't think you can have rights without responsibilities. I mean, because rights are about everyone has rights. And so if it's just, that's what I mean. If it's just about my rights as a gay man, I just want to get as many rights as I possibly can for me and other gay people. Well, I mean, okay, but who are you providing that for? Are these rights other people's rights? Don't I have a responsibility to, make sure that we're all treating each other well? I can't elevate any one group of people. I mean, we try to, respect everybody. That's the thing I think, like, no matter where you are in the power pecking order, you actually have the same responsibilities. And this is really, people don't like this. It's uncomfortable. Like, no, I'm not trying to create like a special gay patriarchy where gay people are in charge. That would be horrible, let me tell you. But, the point was like, I want a world where we're part of a mix of people, all of whom have a right to exist, all of whom have, full, opportunity. What happened? We all matter together. And it's that the dream was to that democratic, American dream where everybody matters and everyone has rights and we can all live together in a way where we get access to all the gifts that all the different types of people bring together to this world. So I that's what I think. I think that just because you are the most disempowered person doesn't mean you are free to act in ways that don't lead to that better world.
To the better, perfectly put. Because back to Utah Phillips saying anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Just happens that the word freedom etymologically breaks down to that. Making freedom comes from making one's rules for one's own self. What does freedom mean to you now?
Well, I mean, fundamental to freedom is to live in a world where fear does not control what you are allowed to do.
Yeah.
I think, didn't Nina Simone once say this? Freedom means no fear.
Yeah.
And if I'm constantly having to battle, and look, I'm not talking about the personal fears, but if I feel free if I feel like I can really express myself and not be punished for it, if I can be who I am and not be punished for it. And, I mean, that's why I don't know that we're ever going to be fully free, but we can at least keep trying to recreate the structures that allow everyone to be free, allow everyone to be themselves. If the thing is, if you can't be yourself, then I don't get access to who you are and
Yeah.
what you have to offer. And
Yeah.
I am impoverished by the fear that controls you and stops you.
Yeah.
You know, so I want a world that's not just free because I want freedom, because I actually want all the different colors that are available, you know, to fill my eyes.
Yeah.
I don't want a limited palette. I need more. I need more. I need every fucking color that's out there. And that means you have to be free to give those colors to the world.
Beautiful. So how do you find peace of mind?
Well, I have to accept that I don't have control over the world. I have to I have to accept that everything I do will be inadequate to that greater task, and that I keep doing it. It's, you know, you take the action and you let the results go. I think it's an AA kind of thing too, you know. But you keep taking the actions, you keep making the art, you tell the truth as much as you can, and you don't let yourself get sidelined by other people's arguments. You know, I can only bring to the world what I am. And I know that it's probably not going to have the impact that, you know, we imagine when we're 12 and have big dreams. But, you know, you'd never know. Look, Connie Converse was discovered 50 years after her death, maybe 40 years after her death. She made work in this total vacuum. Nobody understood it. Like handfuls of people understood it. And by sheer happenstance, 40 years after her death, the tapes were surfaced and people responded to them, and it went on. You don't know what's going to happen. But what you do know is if you do not create the work, if you silence yourself, then none of that work can ever be discovered.
Yeah.
And even if it won't be discovered, maybe it's just a few people it's impacted. The impact on it will resonate through them to some other action they took. It's the butterfly wings, you know, in around the
Yes.
world that make a hurricane somewhere else. You're not going to know. I'll be dead. I will probably be dead before any real impact, you know, happens. But that's what
Well,
it is.
again, you did a cosmic kismet kind of thing. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
It's like, you're more interesting than you think you are.
That is good, Dudley. If which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Oh, God.
I get that the most. Oh God is the answer I get the most.
Like that. uh, I have no idea, honestly. I can't
Okay,
encapsulate my life.
that's all right, Dudley. They want to scent the glue in the binding of your autobiography. What smell?
mm, I think it's the smell of a kind of rubber glue in the at the newspaper my father worked at.
Oh
It's
yeah, that's cool.
I just remember that smell, and there was a kind of excitement to it there. Uh, I
Well,
I hadn't thought about that in years. You literally just brought that up, but that's a very
wow,
primal early memory of mine.
yeah. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
uh, Tompkins Square Park in New York,
Nice.
and it would be made of cedar.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
I never had and I never want. Worship.
WOR? Worship?
Yes. Worship
Dude,
terrifies me, because
that
worship
is
is dehumanizing. It
that
turns you
is
into an
amazing.
object.
Yeah. The three answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin. So, so fame is sort of in the worship category, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but it's that
Yeah.
particular kind
Yeah.
of yeah, where people stop actually hearing you and listening to you, because you're an object of magic rather than an
Yeah.
object of communication.
Yeah.
It's why I've always with really religious evangelical people, they're very, very focused on the divinity of Jesus Christ, but
Yeah.
they're not interested in his actual teachings,
Yeah.
which
You're
is
right.
really freaky. So I
Yeah.
don't want the art version of that to happen
Yeah.
to me. And by never getting famous, I've secured that.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Honestly, I'd probably just throw up,
Good
making it
laugh.
worse. Up to here, then.
Yeah, good laugh, Dudley. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Well, I mean, no cultural shift is complete, but there are some, as time progresses, as you're growing up and growing older, you see these fundamental arguments that you have to argue with, and you think, we're finally going to explain, argue past it, and then you discover out of the blue that there's this next generation, and they've kind of just like dumped the whole argument and started accepting things. So although a lot of Gen Z did vote for Trump, so that's disappointing. But among the younger people, there's a lot of old, tired arguments about what is allowed, what is possible, what the options for your life can be, that they just sort of take as second nature. They're not worried about them. They're past those arguments.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, good. We don't have to go through that bullshit of trying to explain to people who don't want to hear. And, just that I find kind of very, very exciting. But
Good.
So that's probably the best thing I can see. And those people excite me. And what doesn't excite me are the people who've there are people, and this has always been true. I'm going to tell you this. It's a mark of every generation that we believe that everybody who came before us was stupid.
Yeah.
And so we think back into the olden days, oh yeah, well, they were dumb then, but we're smart today. What I've kind of started to notice is that those old, limiting biases, generally what happens is, we kind of get over those, but we're not free. We actually just put a new set of different biases on us, and self-limiting structures. Often they're academic structures we've been taught and everyone agrees with them, but actually they're also limiting too. People came before us often were much more sophisticated than we think they were. Leslie Harris's book, In the Shadow of Slavery, was one of these books that really hit me, where I realized that, these enslaved people in 1800 were saying and writing things as sophisticated about race as anything you heard from Black Lives Matter. Blew me away. And it's like, oh, well, they weren't educated. They were in desperate straits. They couldn't have done that. No, they were really fucking smart. The same thing true. There was actually a recent documentary. Oh, I can't remember the name of it. It was actually about, and it was a documentary where they reenacted these interviews with trans women at UCLA in like 1960. And the things that they were saying about themselves, incredibly sophisticated, even though no one could have been more marginalized than these people at that time. It's like, wow. So the people in the past, we have proof that they were way more sophisticated than the culture of the time and way more sophisticated than we give them credit for today. And so obviously I'm old now. So it's just like, I'm not as stupid as you think. You know, we did think about these things. We did have a lot of ideas. Every older person has. So I would just say, watch it when you were young. You're not as smart as you think, and we weren't as dumb as you believe, you know.
Great words, really articulate and concise again, Dudley. So tell me a question that remains unresolved for you.
God, I think all the questions are unresolved. Well, I don't. What's unresolved for me is I don't know whether the human race is going to make it. I'm not the idea that the arc of history bends toward justice. I don't think that's true. I think we can bend it, and the bending of it requires constant work. It's a kind of work. It's like we were so committed to the speed of change that we don't accept how long it takes and how much sustained effort. And we're not gonna perfect the human race. We are human. We're messy. So I think it's the idea that we're going to complete this, you know, is a fantasy, and it's actually what makes it most likely that we won't make a better world, because we just think we just want it to be done. We think we can forget about it. Yeah. We have to have a larger vision all the way through. We're not at a point in history where we can only worry about our little corner of it or our little angle on it. We have to make a world with people who we hate and who hate us too.
Yep.
So I guess for me, that's, I mean, I don't know if that's something I don't know how we do that. That's hard to do. People are limited, but I feel like we can't give up the larger vision.
Wise words indeed. So Dudley, a couple more and we're out of here. This has really been fun. I appreciate it. I've learned a lot. How has writing, theater, and song making shaped your behavior?
Well, I don't know who I am unless I give form to the inchoate things in my head. I don't know who I am. That's how I find out who I am. So I couldn't do any of the things that I've done. I could not be the person I am with the consciousness I have if I had not created those things. If I'd not been in a constant generative act, we are not. This is the thing. We are not like just completely full people inside ourselves. We just have to put that completed person out to the world. We are in a constant act of, as with Penny, becoming. That never stops. I mean, if it ever stops, you've not become, you're dead. Yeah. It is, you are in a never ending act of growth and transformation and change. And that can be something that's closed off and fester and boil like an infection, or it can be a continuing, it can be a continuing thing. Because it doesn't, we are never completed. And that's the biggest danger, I think, to think that we're cooked and done.
Yeah, because this is, you've led perfectly into Thornton Wilder in 28. He said, art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, It's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 3 hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Well, I mean, you tell the secret so that the secret can become something else. A secret told becomes part of the world. A secret is something that is withheld from humanity. And a secret, if those truths don't become part of the world, it just becomes it's kind of like, I've been thinking about like the difference between, like an artful narrative and a Gothic story. A Gothic story is about the horrifying things that happen, but none of the horrible things that happen in a Gothic story are about anybody else. They're about that crazy family. They're about, whatever that is. And so it's kind of entertaining, but it has no meaning beyond itself.
Yeah.
And so the secret told then becomes part of, what happened when the first person wrote, The Well of Loneliness. Maybe that's the first lesbian novel. Suddenly this secret thing that no one could talk about existed, and it became part of the frame of reference. That influential artists are not, when people say, are you influenced by them? I think they get it wrong, because influence means like, oh, I started like writing like them. No, what they do is they open up territory you did not know existed. They open up a dimension, like I didn't know, like I'm here at the desk trying to put things in the desk, and you show me, oh my God, there's a whole yard out there. Oh my God, I could put things out there. I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know that was an option. So the secrets we tell, we're always trying, I can't tell enough secrets. I'm trying to find more secrets to tell so I can be part of the mix. So I don't know about withholding. What is withheld? The secrets that are withheld are the ones I can't put my finger on.
Wow.
And that's that thing that gnaws, like there's something I need to get out. There's something I need to understand in here. Let me keep writing it. Maybe I can get that out. So if I get out, maybe I can know what it is. The worst secrets are ones we keep that are kept from ourselves.
Yeah. You've opened up a lot of portals of discovery. That's what Joyce said mistakes are, but it's like there's many options, and you've opened up a lot of these. There's many ways, multiple ways to look at these perspectives and strategies. What gives you the most optimism?
The most optimism is that I don't know. I'm still alive. It's not, I'm not, I look at what I have available. I have more time available to me. I feel like I have no time because I'm juggling some things. But well, there are a number of things. I think one is that I feel like today we are not as constrained by geography as we used to be. Yeah. You can live anywhere in this world and not be cut off from humanity. And a lot of that is virtual. But, when I was growing up, you had to get out of Kentucky. If you wanted to do anything, you had to go to New York. Not everybody has to do that now. I think it's great. I think it's a bad and a good thing. There aren't not as much of these like central locations that everyone must go. Bohemia as a geographic location is pretty much dead. Yeah. And that's often really painful and difficult. But by the same token, nobody lives nowhere. That old Milan Kundera book, Life is Elsewhere, that title, that is not necessarily true anymore. Life is everywhere. And that also means that like we are connected to everybody, but wherever you are, as I said, like pay attention to where you are. That everywhere is somewhere, and everywhere is connected to everywhere else. If only we will pull it together and recognize it.
That's really good. The first question I asked you in part one is, what's the best thing for a human being? And your answer was so delightful and inspiring. Listening to others and think about it. I love that. I love that answer, Dudley. When they asked Wilhelm Reich, what's the best thing for a human being? He said, another human being. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism? That's what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life, and he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, Dudley. Thank you so much.
Gerry, it is always inspiring to talk to you. I love everything you bring to this conversation. It's just, I get as much out of it as you are, believe me. So thank you.
Believe me, I just love this time together. And like I said, when I started doing these part twos, I was like, oh no, I'm going to lose my notes on part one. I don't want to repeat the same stuff. So I force myself to listen to them like the night before. And it's always like at 4 in the morning. And I'm like, this is amazing. It's like filling my time, with my headphones on. And I'm like, I can't believe, because it really reconnects me,
Oh, it's great.
with these experiences. And I'm so lucky. And what you said was amazing, because mid-career, McLuhan turned Global Village into the Global Theater, because Sputnik went up and it formed a prosimian arch around the whole world. And what is it now? Everybody has a YouTube channel and everybody is on the Global Theater. And it's quite remarkable how we share. Like our Joyce Reading Club this evening will have a guy from Brazil, Austin, Texas, New York, Ohio. They're like all over, and we're all in a family. So your line about we're not so constrained by geography is quite remarkable.
Yeah, we're lucky.
Yeah.
Look, there was a time, and think about all those, great musical art. I was thinking, like, do you remember Judy Sill?
Oh, yeah.
So she, came out and, she was on that label, and then it just didn't go anywhere. And so she just disappeared.
Yeah.
That wouldn't, and to be discovered later after, she was, destitute, and, it's horrific what happened to her. But, we are not, you can't disappear as complete. They don't control these venues. These controlling institutions aren't in such control now. Yeah. There is a way that we can continue to live, even if we are not anointed and given that kind of support. So no one has to completely disappear. The plenitude, can make it often hard to find people, and I know it's very difficult for people to find me, but at least it's possible. And because of the way we speak personally, one-to-one in this new global village, that we're really in, it's often those, individual recommendations, like, you should hear this, you should hear that is so much more impactful than just, some Rolling Stone review. Which, the funny thing is, they told me years later, is that, oh yeah, you get a review in Rolling Stone, it wouldn't sell a single copy. So you had attention, but actually no attention, weirdly. Whereas, individual people, like hand to hand talking to each other, actually have an impact. Yeah. So, there is a lot to be grateful for, in spite of all the horrible things that happen. Yeah. Horrible things, great things, How lucky we have this kind of turmoil.
Yeah. Lucky we had this time together. Thank you so much, Dudley.
Thank you.
Again, I say this sincerely, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Amen. Amen, brother.
Thank you, Dudley. Love you, man.
Talk